Yeah.
But why is it that we often wait to experience pain before we decide to change a part of our lives, make a different choice, to create a shift? Why is it that we wait so often for stress and pressure?
I had that question was burning in me because, I was traveling around, had the privilege of this stage of life, traveling around the earth and working with people from every walk of life, right? 100 plus countries I've worked in. And I'd see the same problems, even though you mean different cultures. Like, go to an Asian culture, it's not about the individual, it's about the group, right? But I'd still see the same problems. And then I got obsessed with it. Like, okay, what's the common human experience? Because I'm seeing the same problems, even though it's a different culture, even though it's different beliefs, right? And I began to realize that there's certain human needs. And there were 6 that I identified that I've used ever since, and it's helped me understand. And so one of those needs is certainty. And it's the base human need. Certainty that you can avoid pain and that you can be comfortable is the most basic need. It's a survival need, because if you have continuous pain, that's continuous damage. Continuous damage equals death, right? But what happens for people is most people, that first basic need is where they live. They don't grow. Another need, the second need, is uncertainty. Because ironically, if you're certain all the time, you're bored out of your mind. If you're completely uncertain, you're kind of freaked out. And a balance is not it. It's the ability to use both, enter both worlds. And then there's the need for significance, which is a big part of our culture today, thanks to social media. That need to feel special, unique, important, right? It can be a very positive emotion or need. It can be very negative depending upon how it's used, how it's directed. And then there's the need for connection and love, which everybody has. And those 4 needs, everybody finds a way to meet. Even if you have to lie to yourself, work 20-hour days, you're going to find certainty somehow. You're going to find variety. You're going to find some form of significance. Some people do it by tearing other people down. Some people do it by working harder. It's different. You're going to find some level of at least connection, if not love. But the final 2 are what make people feel alive, which is growing. Everything in the universe grows or dies. And contributing. Everything in the universe contributes or it's eventually eliminated by evolution. So those are the spiritual needs, growth and contribution, where you get beyond yourself. And I think that the majority of us don't take moves because of fear, and fear is just uncertainty. It's that base need. And when I go around and I describe this in more detail, and I work with a big audience, 15, 20,000 people, and I'll say, have them do a set of exercises and have them figure out what triggers them to be certain or uncertain, what triggers them to have variety and so forth. So they understand that like everything I do is to meet these needs. But then I get them to say, what are your top 2? Not what you think they should be, not what you want them to be. What are they? And 90% of the people in our culture are certainty and significance or significance and certainty, even though they really want love. So they have this route, like if I can be successful enough, then I'll be worthy of it. Or if I can just control it enough and know it's that way, but you can't control love, right? And so most people they're trying to meet their needs in a kind of a backwards way. And I think that fear, that uncertainty is what keeps most people from growing until they get enough pain. And then that pushes them through a threshold where their needs aren't being met. They got to change. And unfortunately, most people wait till they have enough pain. Now, that's not my preference. I'm sure it's not yours, but I'm sure you've had experiences as much as I've had where you did have to be pushed that far to get there, right?
Yeah. By the way, I'm so glad I asked you that question because that's the best answer I've ever heard to it. It's brilliant.
Very simple.
It's simple, but it's profound as well, because usually we would say, oh yeah, the reason why we wait till we don't have to change is because we're comfortable and we're okay with it. But really, it's because you're saying these needs keep us trapped almost.
In fact, if you're wanting to change but not changing, it's because some of your needs are met by what you're doing and some of them aren't. That's why you're in that push-pull, but you don't usually do enough until you're pushed over the edge. Like smoking a cigarette, what does it give people? Comfort, because you take a breath of cigarette, you take a nice, slow, deep breath in and take it out. It calms the nervous system, right? It's something that they're comfortable with. It's variety. If they're all stressed out and then they start to breathe differently, it's variety in the body. For some people, they did originally for significance. I'm cool, I'm smoking. Or today, it's not really that cool to most people, but for some generations, some places it is. Some people see it as a connection with themselves. But if all of a sudden you're now in a relationship with somebody who doesn't smoke, and you really love them and you want their total love and attention and they're completely disgusted by cigarettes, now my needs for love, right, are really strong, and my need for this comfort is really strong. And so you have this push-pull. And then some people make the shift, some people don't.
Absolutely. Well, what you said to me really rung a bell for me, and we spoke a bit about it earlier. Like, I came to a point in my life, there was one point earlier when I left the monastery where I really struggled with my health, which I've spoken about before. But even more recently, and it's interesting, you were 31, I'm 34 now, and it was probably around a similar time, maybe around 30 years old, where I realized that I had 2 choices. I either had to slow down or I had to up my focus on my health.
Right.
And that's why I'm so excited about this book for the world to read.
Yeah.
Because you're giving us opportunities and access to thought and ideas and practices and medicine that can help us up our game of our health.
Yeah, massively.
Because often what we do is we choose to slow down. We choose to just go, okay, well, I'm just going to do less.
Yeah.
And you and I think we both connect on the fact that actually giving and service and contribution and making an impact on such big needs that I was just like, I don't want to stop though. Like just as you said with the energy point, I don't want to not be able to do as much and give more.
Yeah.
So how do I change my health? And that simple decision, it's what led me to be attracted to what you're doing in this book and the work in this area. Talk to us a bit about that energy piece. In the book, you talk a lot about boosting your energy through natural compounds.
Yes.
And when I was reading about this, I was fascinated because we're not hearing about this everywhere.
If somebody were to tell you 5 years ago that you could reverse aging, people would laugh at you. But today, there are billions and billions of dollars being spent by the richest people in the world, mostly in Silicon Valley, and some of the greatest scientists in the world. And there have been breakthroughs in the last 5 years that are amazing. So there's a man named Dr. Sinclair, David Sinclair from Harvard. He's probably the #1 longevity expert in the world, and I write about him in the book. And one thing is he's 53 chronologically, but he's 33 biochemically. I've applied what he's taught me for 6 months now, since I met him, 7 months, maybe 8 months now. And I'm 62, but I'm 51. And my goal is to get it down to 41 or 42 if I possibly can. But you go, how's that possible? Well, there are ways of reversing, everybody knows their body's made of stem cells, I'm sure by now. And there's ways of reversing the process of a stem cell, literally from skin back to pluripotent, where it can become anything. The man who did that was Dr. Yamanaka, won the Nobel Prize for it. David Sinclair took his work, applied it to reversing the aging, and he started with mice. And he took these mice that had glaucoma, so they burned out the nerves in the eyes, and those don't regrow. And he's the first time, he'll probably win a Nobel Prize from this, he reversed the aging process and grew back their eyes so they have sight again, to give you an idea. They're using gene therapy. There's a young man that I interviewed in the book there who was on America's Got Talent, who was blind, who now can see by this gene therapies. These are the types of things that just sound like magic. The book is filled with things where I interviewed 150 of the smartest scientists, Nobel laureates, regenerative doctors and scientists to show you what's happening right now that you might think would happen 20 or 30 years from now. It sounds like magic, or within 36 months. That's what it's all really based on. But here's what I want your audience to understand around energy. So everybody's heard of the genome or their DNA, right? You can think of the genome as being like the piano keys, but the music is played by a player, which is the epigenome. Epi means above. And the epigenome is affected by your diet, your exercise, how much exposure to radiation, etc. Well, most people have heard that. But the epigenome really is governed by 7 master genes. They're called sirtuins. Now, your audience doesn't have to remember all these names, but just stay with me. Just think there's 7 master genes that do 3 or 4 things that are critical. First, they turn on and off the different genes in your body. That's the epigenome. And if you turn on the wrong ones, you age too soon, or your energy drops. So when this is fully fueled, when those sirtuins are doing their job, everything happens in the right way. Second thing they do is they reduce your inflammation, which is the basis of most breakdown in the body. Third thing they do, which is critical, is they help your mitochondria, which is the energy force inside every cell in your body, convert food into energy, into ATP. It's pretty important. And then they have a separate task that is they clean up your DNA. So at 35 or 34, you have a certain amount of exposure, more than when you were 20. Mm-hmm. When you're 50, it'll be even higher. At 60, even higher. Well, around 40, your stem cells drop off the cliff. Around 50, the sirtuins, the fuel of those sirtuins drops off the cliff. And that's called NAD, which I'm sure some of your people have heard about. You may have even spoken about. And you can do NAD as an IV. It doesn't absorb a lot, though. NAD, though, has a precursor called NMN, like never mother never. I'm sure you've heard of it. And so I've known about that. And so, but I didn't understand that if you don't have enough NAD and NMN, then the body has to decide between, do I help the body turn on to epigenome? Do I help it reduce inflammation? Because there's only so much. Do I really help it create enough energy in the cell? Or do I clean up the DNA? So imagine you have a mansion and you have a young staff and your house looks perfect all the time because they're young and bright and they're on top. Things break down, no one notices, they clean it up. But as they get older and slower, and then there's less resources, NAD, now the mansion starts to break down. That's aging. So what Dr. Sinclair did is figure out how to supplement that NMN. And you can go buy NMN on like you look on Amazon even, and there's probably a list of a dozen or so brands that do it. So we tested 6 of them just for price points as of $39 a month to $129 a month. And there was no NMN in any of them. And I asked the lab guy, I said, are these people just thieves? He goes, well, most of it comes from China, so I can't say for sure. He said, but what I can tell you is what's more likely is NMN breaks down in less than 30 days. So by the time it comes from China, gets to your door, there's nothing in it. So they built a more stable NMN, which we have and use, but there's something coming I want your audience to know about. That'll shut up. I've talked about it so long time.
No, this is amazing. This is fascinating, yeah.
So there's a company called Microbiotech and Edenrock, this merger of these 2 companies. They saw the power of NMN, and they said, if you could find an M&M that was stable and was even more absorbable, it would transform people. So, for example, in a mouse, they give NMN to mice and they live 30% longer. So not all mice studies transfer to humans. They take an old mouse, like a 70-year-old person would be like a 20-month-old mouse, okay? So that's an old mouse. And they put them on a treadmill, and the most they can run without collapsing is about 1/4 kilometer. A young dynamic mouse, like a 21-year-old, can run 4 times that, a full kilometer.
Wow.
14 days on NMN, and the old mouse, the 70-year-old mouse, will run 2 to 3 kilometers, 200 to 300% more. So again, I read about this, and I was like, well, will that really transfer to humans?
Yeah.
So this has been the breakthrough. It only happened a few months ago, right before I published the book. The Special Forces in Boston for 2 years has been doing a private study that's been top secret about using this new form of NMN. It's called MIB 626. And it'll be available in 18 to 24 months.
Wow.
But it got out because the commander, they just finished the 2-year study. First year was safety, second year was efficacy. And the commander was debriefing his team and didn't realize there was a newspaper person in the room. So part of it got out. It was in the Daily Mail a couple weeks ago also. And they only know a part of it. I can't tell you the things. I'm an investor in the company. I can't tell you what's not public, but I'll tell you what's public. What the commander said was, here's what I can tell you, gentlemen. What happens with mice happens with the most powerful men and women in the world, meaning the most conditioned men in the world saw massive increases in endurance just from taking this M&N, massive increase in muscle strength without any more stimulation, and most importantly, increased cognitive ability, which when you're a soldier, what's going to get you to stay alive when you're exhausted or beat up or injured or complete the mission is going to be your brain. So they're now doing studies on COVID with it. They're doing studies with groups of 40 to 60-year-olds that are just unconditioned, and they're seeing the same result. So in 18 to 24 months, the FDA will have, this will not be a nutraceutical. This will be something, go to your doctor, and imagine you get something that is natural, but you put it in your body, and now all 4 of those things I told you about are going full tilt. Now you're turning on and off the right genes. Now inflammation's coming down. You got more energy at a cellular level, and your DNA is being cleaned up. So that's less than 2 years away from us right now.
That's incredible. So you first approach it through behavior change. Now you're changing the actual product that we take in. Yeah, do both.
Yeah, do both.
And that's amazing.
Yes.
And do you think though that, and putting together both those approaches that you've invested in from a point of view of your whole career and what you're working on now, how much is that change of behavior still going to be required? Because my worry is, as you know, is people say, okay, I'm going to take this pill and it's going to drop my inflammation, but then I'm going to eat things that create more inflammation. Like, how does behavior change go hand in hand with that?
I found that when people have more energy, I don't know what your experience is, that their behaviors change.
Yes.
When you're low energy, kind of lethargic, even the way you think, I mean, look at what COVID's done by having people coped up and not moving very much, right? I've had a chance to use this product. There's products available right now of NMN. I've been using those and they're very powerful, but this one is even more visceral. I mean, you feel like you're ready to buzz around.
I cannot wait.
It's like, it blows my mind what it does, right? So I think when people feel like that, my experience is they tend to develop different patterns. It's just like if you've ever gone on a cleanse, even for a short time, your palate changes. And all of a sudden you don't like the things that you once liked. So my hope is for people there, but I don't just rely on that, as you know, because I teach people all the other ways to shift their life. But I think it's important to know that there are some tools available right now and some coming very quickly that will radically change the value of your health. And also, regardless of your age, it's the whole idea is like to be able to take, as you get older, to stay younger physiologically and psychologically and emotionally. Incredible.